Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Network User Group Podcast. I'm Mark Tierney, the ONUG Working Group CTO. Today, we're continuing the ONUG Security Blog Series, and I'll have three great guests joining me to talk about what everybody's talking about. That's right, Zero Trust. I'll be right back with our guests, but first, a word from Sysdig.
It can be hard to feel in control of security in the cloud. With Sysdig Secure, you can continuously detect vulnerabilities, excessive permissions, risky configs, unusual behavior, and threats. Built on an open source stack, the platform is radically simple to run and scale, giving you deep visibility into your cloud security in just a few minutes. Sysdig allows you to confidently run applications and infrastructure in the cloud.
Joining me now is Michael Clark. Michael is the DevSecOps Community Engagement Director at ONUG, and he's also the Cloud Native Security Co-Chair. Hey, Michael, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, thank you for inviting us and for, putting yourself.
It's been a long time coming. It's been, right? We've been trying to get this together for a while.
Right. That's right. And even though you may regret, having made the offer, we will try to spare you too much.
Never
no
regrets.
Old network guy chatter, but no.
As long as we have fun and our members learn something, that's all that really matters. And what we're going to be talking about today is kind of foundational. You've mentioned it several times. That this part in the series of parts is a foundational piece, and it's Zero Trust, the critical essence. And here to help us talk about it are a couple of guests. One is your co-chair on the team, Forrest Bennett. Forrest is the cybersecurity advisor at FedEx and cloud native security co-chair. Hey, Forrest, how you doing, bud?
Hey, Mark. Hey, Michael. Good to see you guys. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. So Michael and Forrest together run HERD on the cloud native security working group. And the way I like to say it is the working groups at ONUG, they're the essence of ONUG, in my opinion. There's so much great work that happens between the enterprise consumers and the enterprise producers. They come together. They do fantastic things. One of those things is the Cloud Native Security Working Group. As I like to say, a very heady group of very smart technical people in the security space, but they're also writers and now bloggers / podcasters. Our next guest on our panel today is Mudit Tyagi, technology architect at F5. Mudit,
hey,
you are the author of this this critical piece, this foundational piece, Zero Trust, the critical essence, which, by the way, can be found at onug.net. Look for it on our blog section of the website. So Mudit, thanks for joining us, and thanks for writing this piece.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our vigorous conversation here.
All right, so you can't have these conversations on something sort of notionally new like Zero Trust until you sort of understand where we came from. Why do we care about Zero Trust? What got us here? You mind give us a little background on it?
Sure. So Zero Trust is, if you remember, Operation Aurora, which Google faced. So they were breached and IP was stolen. And now Google was this team of extremely capable security engineers and had lots of security infrastructure. But what they recognized is that the practices that they were following did not keep them safe. So they came up with this idea of beyond trust. And the notion there was, just because somebody is able to access the network, once they're in, they should not just implicitly be trusted. If they are trying to get to other assets which live inside the network, more trust should be established. They should be challenged and should prove.
So let me stop you there. So that resonates with me from the perspective of, at one point I ran perimeter security for a large financial organization, and we had these notions of, hey, we put up fences, we put up firewalls, we We cordon off areas. And the idea there was, hey, if you're inside that space, everything's cool, dude. Like, no worries. That's
Exactly.
just not the case, right, Michael? I mean, is that fair?
Well,
We shouldn't be looking at these things this way anymore.
having spent some time in that very same locale down the hallway, I have to say that we were delusional then, and we've gotten wiser. Yeah, perimeter security was as it's as old as those medieval castles, and in fact, there's a certain company with 3 initials that used to onboard people by handing out pictures of castles and moats and saying this is basically our security model. Unless you've got some really good alligators, crocodiles, whatever continent you happen to be on, that never really did work. And now it's been proven not to work year after year after year. And that's a good part of why we now have the zero trust articulation, if you will, along with an awful lot of other things that have happened in the last 20 years, is that we've disabused ourselves of some earlier, really, not high efficacy operating practices.
Yeah, and if you actually put historical perspective here, so Operation Aurora was 2010.
Yeah.
And okay, so we had Beyond Trust, and we had ZTNA, and we had SASE. People realized that perimeter security is not enough. This is not a new realization. And over the last decade, people have been improving their internal security mechanisms. And people have been talking about zero trust. But then SolarWinds happens, and which is around the block, just 2020, and the firms and organizations that were owned in that breach were the top security organizations.
Right.
With the latest, we're not talking 2010 now, with the latest security technology.
Yeah.
And we see that we further need to improve how we do zero trust. We need to go more granular than what we figured out over the last decade.
But Mudit, to be fair, like, you're not even saying, it's not even a matter of like closing in the walls and making the perimeter smaller. It's more than that. I mean, Forrest, jump in here. It can't just be tightening up the perimeter, making the perimeter smaller. What's your take on on where this is headed?
So I was going to mention that the problem with the moat and castle model is sometimes you got to let down the drawbridge and let people in. And sometimes those people are not going to be who they purport to be. So if I come up with all the credentials and pretend to be a citizen of the realm, I'm across that drawbridge and inside. And like you said, once I'm on the inside, I'm good to go. It's all well and good. And unfortunately, that's not the world we live in anymore. It never has been in IT. We just deluded ourselves, as Michael said, into thinking that if we build a wall big enough, the bad guys won't climb over it or just tunnel under it. So the idea, of course, of zero trust has been a long time coming. It's been a lot of hype. It's a marketing term. Everybody has to admit that. But it's fundamentally a part of the defense in depth model that everybody needs to be embracing. And part of that is don't trust anything, verify everything. So even though I've crossed that drawbridge and I'm inside the castle, everybody I come in contact with should challenge me and say, "Hey, are you really a citizen of the realm? Show me your token."
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, Mudit, in some correspondence with me, shared this concept of assume a breach mindset. Mudit, tell us more about what that is and what organizations need to do to assume a breach mindset.
Yeah. So as Forrest pointed out, just because somebody is in You cannot trust them, and you cannot work with the assumption that you've got strong security and nobody can make it in, and if they make it in, they will lights will shine and you will immediately find them. In fact, in my opinion, the critical essence of zero trust is to have a mindset of assuming breach. There are so many ways for hackers to plant malware on internal systems that it's near impossible to stop that from happening. Now, if you accept that and turn on this mindset that I'm assuming that malware is lurking within my environment, then you begin to truly internalize the principles of zero trust, which are apply least privilege. Why? Because uh, there might be a piece of malware which is impersonating a user or a workload that is allowed to talk to your critical databases. You don't want that user to have full privileges, to read everything, modify everything in that database. You want that user to have minimal privileges based on what the user needs to do. So even if the breach, post-breach situation is that the malware is impersonating that user, because you use the principle of least privilege, you minimize the impact. And
all right, let me stop there. I want to have a discussion around this for a second. All right, this is open game to anybody. So in your blog, you use the term, never trust, always verify. You just made a reference to, least privilege, right? This is a essential point of view and direction that everyone needs to head towards. However, and this is the question, is that takes knowledge, that takes systems, that takes support, that takes an awareness to be able to implement against it. Where are organizations in that realm? I mean, Forrest, are companies ready to do this yet?
I think they're getting there. And the key to that in big organizations is having a centralized inventory system that outlines and has labels, roles, if you will, for every device, every user. Back to the analogy of the castle and moat, not only do you not trust the guy coming across, I'm not trusting the horse he's riding on or the cart that he's pulling. Therefore, all of those things have to be fundamentally authenticated. You can't authenticate the user the same way you authenticate the cart and the horse, because those are machines within our environment that have to be given a certain level of trust in order to do their jobs. So role-based access control, i.e. least privilege, has to be implemented. Companies are getting there. They're finally understanding that the old castle and moat wasn't good 20 years ago, but nobody recognized that. 10 years
Michael,
ago,
I feel like when Forrest says horse and cart and castle, and it's a direct shot at guys like you and me. If you know what I mean.
He's got a lot of nerve. He's got a lot of nerve.
supportive.
I mean, I think he's got a lot of nerve. But
I built networks and I built perimeter in previous lives doing the same thing. So
yeah, exactly.
You're pointing at me too.
He knows what
But
he's
Michael,
got.
but Michael, what I want to get to with you is, so as cultures change, as mindsets change, it seems like a big part of the change is going to happen in the DevSecOps community.
Well, yeah.
This is an area that I know is kind of near and dear to your heart. I was wondering if what your impression is, sort of mindset wise from a DevSecOps perspective.
To just roll back a bit and not too far, and to roll all that forward. Couple of key things have been said in the last 5 minutes that I want to underscore, highlight. Mudit's point about a few minutes ago about mindset. Yes, this is a whole mindset game, you know, and it's expressed in not as a product. It can, I mean, there are many. If you Google, you know, zero trust, you'll come up with probably 50 to 100 products in the American space alone. But it is really a mindset piece, and in that sense, combined with what Forrest is saying, which is really, I don't think we've used the word identity yet, but what we're advocating is, and this is very much a DevOps, DevSecOps, agile kind of mindset approach in and of itself. We're looking at the culture and we're saying, well, we used to define things a certain way. I mean, we're not even talking about technology. We're just talking about how did we look at something. And we looked at something in the old school, you know, to beat that dead horse totally, Trojan horse, if you will. That was a high trust assumption world, right? Now we're like, forget that. That was naive. So what do you replace it with? Well, you replace it with, you know, an understanding of what the machine is, what the device is, what the person is, what the role is. So identity is the term. Jump in, guys. But for my money, identity is the wrapper for all of these things. And to go a step further, there's really four kinds. There's the identity of the human beings, maybe the groups that they're part of, but also of the machines. And then there's another kind of identity, the machine to machine identity, the machine to human identity, which gets, some of these things get expressed in APIs and so on. So it's identity, and managing identity is the key, I think, to getting
right.
on.
If you're going to challenge someone, that someone needs to have an identity. You challenge an actor of some kind. It can be a human. The devices that those humans use, those have identities and those have postures that you need to continuously monitor. And then the servers where workloads are running that, you know, the humans are interacting with from their devices, those servers have identities. And on those servers are running workloads.
Yes.
Those workloads should have identities.
That's right. And those are,
yeah.
I'm sorry, and they're all defined by us. I mean, they're not sort of like, you know, it's not like, you know, we drop a drop of, you know, hydrochloric acid on something and its identity is expressed. I mean, we define what these identities are.
We being users
you know,
systems, we being the security people. That's what you mean by we.
Yes.
And if you going back to your earlier question, Mark, where enterprises are, so people are they've got the inventory of their humans and their devices. I think people are gaining control over that. But the notion of giving identities to workloads and treating those workloads like, you know, they're they also should not be trusted, because one of those workloads may be a piece of malware pretending to be a good workload, talking to a database, stealing information, and then sending it to command and control. So that piece where workloads themselves need to get identified, and you need to, when one workload tries to talk to the other workload, the other one should say, I don't trust you. Prove to me that you are genuine. Prove to me you are who you are and that you're allowed to talk to me, just like we do for humans. That's the evolution.
Right, let me switch gears then, based on what you're just talking about. Being an old timer, large companies, there's this little thing we like to call compliance and governance. And sooner or later, these things turn into, by the way, if I start to shake or twitch, like anytime I hear those words, sometimes I get a little twitch and think about the auditors. And, you know, I mean, I think Forrest probably knows what I'm talking about for sure. He's living it. I know Michael's lived it before. But the truth is, or the reality is that these types of important movements in the security space ultimately drive into what we require of ourselves. Like Michael mentioned, like, we sort of do the identification. Guess what? We also have to, we count stuff. We hold ourselves accountable. We create controls and compliance. How are organizations, Mudit, how are organizations sort of being informed? How is this space being driven? You make references in your piece, to things like NIST and Sarbanes-Oxley, et cetera. How are those standards coming along? Are we getting what we need?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things.
Is that a fair question? It's kind of ambush question there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. It's a fair question, and there's the answer, I think, is actually quite interesting. So there are two things. One is the definition of zero trust, so that the community can understand it, and then recommendations coming from various thought leaders in terms of how to implement it. And then the benefit actually is not only securing your data and containing the impact of a breach, but the benefit can also, I see the benefit also occurring in the area of compliance, because you just, you have, if you do it right, then you have much more granular information about who's talking to who and what they are accessing, and is any of the data leaving or not. These are all things that actually help compliance. Let me go back to what the status of definition and recommendations from the community is. So NIST 800-207 is an architecture description of zero trust. So if you actually look at it, it's quite abstract.
The fact that you know what that number is, you're officially a freak. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
Yes. So
I mean that as a compliment, by the way.
Yeah. So that
it's linked in the article. Go read
it. It defines abstractions. So there's a policy engine. There is a policy enforcement point. And there's data collection that helps the engine to create policy, which gets sent to the policy enforcement point, etc. Notice all abstract terms. That policy enforcement point could be a technology which is appropriate to your environment. It could be a firewall. It could be a WAF. It could be a proxy of some kind. If you're doing Kubernetes environment, it could be a sidecar. So the policy enforcement point is just an abstraction. And then, there is an algorithm which computes, as one entity tries to communicate with the other entity, the policy decision point looks at the posture of the entity which is starting the communication. And that's an abstract description of what should happen. Look at the posture, look at history, look at the sensitivity of the asset that entity is trying to communicate with. And on the fly, and this is important, on the fly, figure out whether this action should be granted or not. And so that's the NIST paper, architecture paper with abstractions. Then, the presidential order happened, the executive order happened in wake of solar winds, that people should actually try to implement. Not people, but the government agencies is what the executive order referred to. And in fact, there's a new memorandum from the OMB, which is telling agencies to, within 60 days, take certain steps, appoint a person who's going to come up with a zero trust plan and report that to OMB. So CISA stepped in and they created a maturity model for zero trust, which is extremely good. And it's, a few months old. And in that maturity model, they describe some of the things we've talked about, identity, and they describe that you need to be concerned about users, about hosts, about application, about data, and about keeping the infrastructure, the network that is being used, also secure using zero trust principles. And for each of these steps, they describe various ways to assess your maturity. And very
Okay, so
useful.
let me stop you there. So you're making a lot of references, a lot of good material. By the way, the call to action at the end of this is going to be read Mudit's paper, because a lot of these things are actually spelled out, and where to go and where to learn. But I want to ask Forrest, so Forrest, from whether it's NIST or the NSA or this cyber security and infrastructure security agency CISA stuff coming out of the SolarWinds event. Is the enterprise getting what they need to move forward from from a guidelines perspective, and is that stuff moving into your compliance and governance space? Is that happening already?
Yes, it is. And I was going to say, if anything, it's more than a lot of organizations need. And I think that for larger organizations like mine, it's a good fit because we reach globally into so many different areas. Therefore, we have so many different compliance requirements that cross, boundaries, country boundaries across the world. Also, it speaks to what I wanted to talk about, which was zero trust. There is no definition for it because really at its core, it's more of a philosophy.
Yeah.
What makes sense for my organization won't necessarily make sense for your organization, which is why the NIST architecture and the framework that ONUG has been working on for cloud security kind of complement one another and allow people to go, oh, okay, I need this piece, and this piece. And then part of that is based on an organization's appetite for risk. What are you willing to deal with? What are you willing to sign off on? What are you fiduciarily, if that's a word, responsible for at your level of being a company? Small and medium businesses have one level of responsibility. Global organizations have a whole other layer of responsibility. And so yes, the frameworks are there, but it's really going to be a matter of, like Mudit said, the executive order specifies the government agencies have to identify a person and a team that's got to go in and start weeding through these requirements and deciding what makes sense for this department, that department, and the third department, and figuring out how to apply those. And it's all going to be a matter of identity management, device management, embedding in DevSecOps so that there's automation involved in making sure that when workloads are spun up, and one of the things that Mudit touched on was, everything's going to be a workload. We didn't talk about containers and microservices. These ephemeral workloads that get spun up and may only be there for microseconds are still a threat. If I'm spinning up microservices on a cloud-based container and they are malware infected, my entire AWS or insert your cloud provider here environment is probably been compromised.
I got to be frank, as you're talking through this, all I can think of in the back of my head is, changes that need to happen to CMDBs. And I started twitching again. Like I just like it's a different kind of twitch, but it's still a twitch. You know what I mean? Like there's work to be done.
Yeah,
well, companies need to, that's where they really need to start. They've got to decide what is going to be their single source of truth for the inventory information, whether it be a human's inventory information, HIPAA-based or benefits-based inventory information for a human, or whether it's a server. And what does that server do? They've got to have a single point of truth that they go to. And generally, that's going to be a CMDB. And yes, CMDBs have finally, I think, gotten to the point that they understand that they can't just be a device management database. It's got to be an overarching
Oh,
database that can take.
absolutely.
Yep.
And you know,
The fact that you acknowledge that made a smart person acknowledge what I just said, like made my day. Like, so that's fantastic. But there's still gaps, and Michael, this is where I keep, I always come back to DevOps, and in this case DevSecOps, like who I see is like brilliant people that sometimes are gap closers. You know what I mean?
On a good day. Well, DevSecOps is a set of practices, right? They may sometimes be presented as a panacea, but the truth is they're just as human built as the next thing. So, right, you're only as
I refuse to believe that they're humans. Keep going.
We're only as good as our ability to actually execute on these brilliant ideas that we have, and execution is demonstrably the hardest thing for human beings to actually get their hands around, as somebody smarter than me once wrote in a book. But we now have, I think, with DevSecOps, with automation, with the guidance, and we're getting good guidance out of organizations as different as NIST and MITRE, so government agencies, non-governmental nonprofit organizations, the vendors themselves coming together, not to flog this notion too much, but right. I mean, what is ONUG all about? We bring suppliers, producers, consumers, in terms of commercial consumers, institutional consumers, together to talk about where the gaps are and what we're missing. And so what was missing 20 years ago wasn't a general sense that, oh my God, you got to pay attention to cybersecurity if you're in a big, SEC regulated or something else field. That became pretty clear pretty quickly. Now it's, well, we actually have pathways and strategies and prescriptions on the table. And it's, even though it looks like this big overwhelming thing, and it is, along with it being a mindset, part of the mindset has to be that if you're not addressing this in an incremental, agile kind of way, then you're probably going to lose, because you only make this manageable by the oldest fashioned of methods, which is to chunk it up, get out of the big bang, waterfall everything mindset, and take a practical, iterative approach to things. Decide.
Because how do you eat a whale?
One bite at a time.
Exactly. So switching gears a little bit, but now maybe just legging it off of that. Mudit, two other points that were in your paper that I want. Well, not necessarily in your paper, but that I know you feel strongly about. You mentioned to me in a conversation about establishing security playbooks. Mm-hmm. What's your tell the audience what that's all about? What are your thoughts on playbooks in this space?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So first of all, I want to go back to what Forrest said. We have the zero trust mindset and principles, and organizations apply them, based on what their needs are. So they need to look at what their needs are and figure out how they would implement some of the abstract suggestions made, for example, in the NIST Zero Trust Architecture paper, etc. The other thing with DevSecOps is also important to realize that one of the principles of Zero Trust is that you're continuously assessing, continuously monitoring, and explicitly verifying every transaction. Humans cannot do that. You have to automate this stuff. And to automate it, one of the best things that you can do, if you've got a good DevSecOps pipeline, then when you are in the test phase of developing some application, etc., it's a very good opportunity to actually study the characteristics of all of the workloads that are involved in delivering that application, right? So it's sort of a green room environment where you can baseline how these workloads will interact with each other. And then in runtime, in production, you can follow the principle of continuously monitoring. Now, doing all this requires some thought. Organizations need to come up with one playbook on their application implementation methodologies, and in there they should include studying the characteristics of various elements of the application. The other playbook that I recommend is, and Forrest alluded to it, you need a team to actually put this playbook together, which is, given whatever infrastructure I own and given whatever technology I own, how do I apply principles of zero trust as I configure each one of these elements to inspect, the transactions that are going through them. And then, if there is a discovery of an anomaly, how do humans get involved in rapidly looking at the information that your automation has collected to come to a conclusion what action you want to take? So, so what when I think about a playbook, of course, security teams already have playbooks, right? There's a red button that gets pressed if there's an indication of breach, and security professionals, SecOps teams know what steps to take in order to contain the breach, etc. Isolate the asset that is under attack, figure out the source of the intrusion, isolate that. So security teams already build playbooks, based on their network environment, based on their.
These things are changing. These things are changing rapidly, right? I mean, like your paper talks about, your blog talks about, like, I mean, the edge is moving around. Like you can hardly keep up with where the edge is or what the edge even means. So what I'm hearing you say is we've got to keep up with these things too.
We got to keep up with these things.
Yeah,
you got to extend the playbooks.
Modifying the definition. I mean, Forrest, this has got to be a bit of a challenge for the enterprise, particularly, coming in, I don't know if we can say post-COVID world yet, or just we're in the COVID world yet still, but, the edge moved like in a step function with people working from home. But at the same time, we've moved, we've moved the edge around on the compute part, not just the where our people are part, right? We did them both. We did them both at the same time, and part of that happened very rapidly. Is the enterprise able to adjust that quickly?
It was not easy in our environment, but in 3 weeks' time, we were able to basically move an entire work group of about 300,000 people out of their offices and into remote work. And we were not positioned for that, because what's VPN and remote access supposed to be limited to the people that need real access, sysadmins that have to answer calls in the middle of the night. And that brings me to the point that I wanted to make in all this is hard. It's not easy. Zero trust is not easy to implement. You've got to have a board level directive, C-suite buy-in and support, and then all of your teams, infrastructure, your developers, your risk and compliance people, network security teams, and InfoSec all have to work together.
Did you say development yet?
Sorry?
Did you say software development yet? I'll tell you, as much as I
said
twitch,
developers. I said developers.
As much as I twitch around compliance and governance and that kind of talk, one thing that takes my twitch away is CI/CD pipeline talk, right? And the idea. I'm serious, Michael. I am. I'm a believer. I'm not as smart as you in this space, but I'm a believer and I'll wave the flag, right? And so no matter what we're doing, right, we need, these concepts, to iterate and be part of our CI/CD pipeline. And I know Mudit is
I
passionate
was
about
going
that
to
too.
get to that by saying, in addition to all of the people that have to work together as a team, to respond to what Mudit said was, how does the SOC respond to all of these alerts that they get? They don't. AI and ML has to be the key to that. You've got to be able to sort through the noise and understand what's false positive, understand what's a false negative, and the real incidents need to float to the top. And the only way to do that is with super smart software that's able to pick through it and go, yes, that looks really anomalous. This might be anomalous, but I think it's really just a false positive. And that's the only way to manage that from a incident response.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming up on the end here, so I'm going to need to try to wrap us up. Mudit Tyagi, author of Zero Trust: The Critical Essence. You can find it on the onug.net website. Mudit, any final thoughts? What's your parting shot that you want to communicate?
My parting shot is as follows. Mindset of assuming breach is the starting point, and then the principles of continuously assessing, explicitly verifying every transaction request, and applying least privilege. Those are the principles to follow. Follow them to the best of your ability. Use the literature that is coming out of NIST, CISA, and DoD has put out a reference architecture. NCCOE is putting together a best practice document to gain more experience in this thought process as you apply it to your own specific environment. And automation is key. So imagine if the developers are following a playbook to write secure software. Then in the CI/CD pipeline, there's another playbook for building baselines of behaviors that you should expect when nobody is attacking the workload. And then in runtime, when anomalies are discovered, there's a playbook. Everyone knows on the team how to react when anomalies are discovered. And even that piece gets automated via a SOAR tool.
Mhm.
So it's difficult, but I believe every enterprise, regardless of their size and what technology they currently use, can start taking useful steps, which will begin to produce, noticeable results in containing the impact of breach. Breach, we have to assume you're containing its impact.
That's fantastic. By the way, you said CI/CD again. All my Twitches are gone. They're all gone. So Forrest, first of all, thank you, or lastly, thank you for your leadership as co-chair on the Cloud Native Security Working Group. I appreciate it. Any final thoughts, sir?
Only thing I was going to say was build, refine, monitor, repeat. That's the way you got to do it. And yes, it's hard, but it's not difficult, and we will get there. So the challenges are up to us to solve, and it's to each organization's best interest to look at this from a 50,000 foot level and to drill down into it as quickly as they can today.
That's perfect. Thanks. Lastly, to my partner in crime, Michael, the other security co-chair, Cloud Native Security co-chair. Any final thoughts, Michael? Your team's kicking butt, by the way.
Well, that's that's not so much our goal. Our goal is to try to shine a light.
Oh, yes.
And I think our friends have been doing a really nice job of that. Look, I would reiterate everything that everyone said, but since they've said it, I don't need to do that. But there's no choice here. I mean, it's not like 20 years ago where we just sort of were stumbling around in the dark. We know what to do, and we know it's hard. But we've got more tools at our disposal, and one of those tools is mindset. We can't not act. If I can use that many negatives in a sentence, it's if you don't already have a plan, you owe it to yourself and your enterprise to get one.
I can't even believe you used a double negative. Like, that doesn't even compute with me, but I get it.
That's like my life in technology. I can't
in this context, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, we can't afford not to act, right? That's the essence of what this is.
Right.
Mudit and the rest of the team. Shout out to the whole cloud native security team. Mudit's written this article, but it's edited, reviewed by the entire cloud native security team. Mudit, we'll be doing another in the series soon. Mudit has helped to edit those documents, so it is a team effort, and we really appreciate it. The call to action, the shout out here is get involved. Like, you want to know more about it, and you start with reading this blog again at onug.net. You can also get involved with ONUG in other ways. Come to one of our conferences. Join the ONUG community of Global 2000 companies and enterprise architects, cloud providers, thought leaders, April 27th and 28th. That's the ONUG Spring Conference. It's going to be at the Meadowlands Conference Center in New Jersey. It's going to be amazing. It'll be a hybrid event. It'll be in person and virtual. And you should come. It's you're going to learn a lot, just like you learned today. And you're going to find out all the cool content and basically how ONUG is helping shape the industry. We're doing it together, suppliers and consumers together. And that's what makes ONUG just a fantastic place to commune and solve problems. That's why it's a great organization. Thanks to Michael, Forrest, and Mudit on behalf of the ONUG community. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next ONUG podcast. Thanks, everybody.